Alright, please bear with me. This is a pretty jank video setup, and the camera's having a hard time keeping things in focal length when my hands get in the way. But this is what I mean by a glaze, right? So this miniature, and I'm trying to work on smoothing my airbrush blending out so that things look a little more smooth. So I have a mixed glaze here at the bottom of the screen. It is a drop of some paint, Vallejo Prussian Blue, and then 5 or 6 drops of Vallejo Glaze Medium and just some water mixed in. The consistency you want is like that. So you want it to kind of, I have too much on my brush there, but you want it basically to go in the recesses and then maybe lightly tint the surface. And the idea is that you're going to take something that's got a pretty rough highlight or rough blend and smooth that out so that you're given a much more subtle gradient. So I'm going to try to glaze on the front of that right thigh a little bit just so you can kind of see what I mean. It's hard because I have to keep my hands at a different angle than I'm used to painting. Go under that arm. No. So I'm going to apply some glaze, and I'm sorry the camera's out of focus. Apply some glaze to the shade, the darkest area I want to shade, and I'll clean the brush off and then kind of lightly spread that pigment over. What that does is that very subtly tints the paint you already have down and helps smooth things out to here. In the comparison picture I posted earlier, you can see the airbrushed model against something that's just been glazed. So like, let's do the shoulder pad on the left. There's a little bit there already. I want that a little darker at the bottom with a little more of a gradient, so I'm going to apply some paint at the bottom, clean off my brush, and then kind of feather that around. And you can kind of see some of that Prussian blue or darker blue pigment up on my lighter blue, but it's kind of slowly, this takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of layers, but for me, I'm really happy with how that result works for what I'm doing. I learned about Vallejo Glaze Medium a couple years ago, and I've been trying to perfect the technique, or improve my technique over time, but you can use it like a wash, like I'm doing here, and just get it in the recess. And here I'm going to smooth it out over that surface. It does come out a little shiny. This model will need a coat of dull coat when I'm done to kind of matte down the finish. But this is what I mean by glazing. I say it a lot, like in my posts about my miniatures and all that, but this is what I do. You can also do this with an airbrush as well. I learned that from Captain Ed. You can put glaze thinned paint in an airbrush at low PSI, and if you're really good with trigger control, you can apply it in certain areas. I did that on this model that I'm working on after I airbrushed the base black. I hope this helps clarify things. I hope it makes more sense to you guys that way. Sorry this isn't a great video. The setup I have isn't super ideal. I'm doing this on my phone camera right now. I'd love to get a different camera, but I have twins on the way, and so my hobby spending is a little more limited right now. But yeah, that's what a glaze is. You don't just wash all over the surfaces, because then you'd be left with some pooling. I don't have an example of that. But for the most part, anytime I'm shading a miniature, this is how I shade now. Unless I'm trying to do something quick. But for the stuff that's kind of my standard quality, this is how I do it. If you guys have questions, go ahead and post them in the comments. Always happy to help kind of share some different technique stuff that I do, if it's something you're interested in. This is definitely not the only way to do it. Some of the YouTubers I've watched that do a lot of glazing won't feather it afterwards. They'll just put it on and let it go. I kind of like to feather it after, because I feel like it gives me a much better effect and control. So there's a water spot because I got careless. So I'm going to have to buff that out with some lighter paint. But hope that helps, guys. Thanks.